What's going on, pilots? Welcome back to the channel. I am excited to announce our next build series, and that is going to be on this TopRc Voyager 3.2 meters. So let's cover some of the equipment that's going to be installed on this build. So beginning with the retracts and brakes, they are going to be the Electron retracts and brake system. And then as far as our servos, we're going to be using the advanced radio servos throughout the entire jet. Now to manage all the power to that servos, we're going to be using the Powerbox Competition SR2 along with an iGyro set, and then this jet is going to be navigated with the Powerbox core. Now as far as turbine, I am going to be using a Switwin 220 Bravo on this jet, so that should give us plenty of power to fly this jet around in the air. And then as far as all of our odds and ends and fittings, we've got a bunch of hardware from BVM, such as the fuel tank fittings and such, from DreamWorks RC, and then also from AeroPanda for our 10-pin amp connectors that we're going to be installing on this jet. So let's go ahead and begin the build series on the TopRc Voyager. Okay, so I am now working on the servo tray. So this is basically just the servo cover for the ailerons, and then this is the servo cover for the flaps. So I went ahead and already just kind of got started with the flap side. So I've got the AR8477 basically installed for the flaps. I did order the aluminum servo arms, which turns out to be a lot longer than I thought. So in the website it's on an inch and a quarter on the first hole, and I think it's an inch and 3/4 on the outer hole. So what I'm probably gonna end up doing is just cutting the control arm shorter, and then just kind of rounding off the tip of it so that it looks a little cleaner, but that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. But anyway, so going back to what I was trying to talk about with insulation, so in the kit you get a bunch of these aluminum servo trays or brackets. One side of it is just drilled out to a 3mm hole, and then the other side has a 3mm hole, but it's actually threaded. So what I ended up doing was measured out from the bottom of the servo cover about 4 centimeters, and then lined it up, and then centered my servo arm, and then basically just clamped this down so it didn't move. And then I drilled my 3mm hole and then fastened it down with the M3 stainless steel bolts with the washer. And then that's pretty much the final product. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the the aileron covers now. I'm sorry. And then, like I said earlier, 4mm or centimeters from the bottom, I just kind of drew a line. And then what I end up doing is putting the brackets on, and then just line up the bottom of the servo to that line, and then center it the best that I can on the servo cutout where the arm's gonna go. And then we're gonna bolt it down and finalize this, and then install it back into the wing. Alright, so just a quick update. So what I did have to end up doing to the servo mounting brackets is that I had to grind off the corners here. And the reason being why I had to do that to both the flaps and the ailerons is that the wood formers where the servo covers screws onto, so the aluminum brackets kind of stick out a little bit and prevents the trays from being able to sit back flush into the wing. So by grinding those corners off, I was able to fit the servo covers properly. And now the last thing to do is just kind of fasten it down for the time being. We're not done with the wiring of this plane yet. The reason why is because I want to get the retracts pretty much installed on this jet. So let's go ahead and pull out the Electron retracts and brakes for this jet, and then pretty much test fit it to see how it's going to look and if there's any modifications that I need to do to it. Alright, so I got the boxes for the Electron retracts and brakes, so let's take a closer look at how they look. So here is the mains for the retracts. It's a pretty hefty looking landing gear, and then also got the nose retracts with the steering tray, servo tray, installed already on this retract. So the other box that we have here houses the main struts. So we've got, I'm just gonna take this out. So here is the nose strut. Pretty hefty looking landing gears, honestly. And then here is the mains. Take a look at those springs. They're pretty heavy duty. You get what you pay for with these Electrons. Top of the line retracts and struts, and then also here is our brakes. I mean, take a look at the size of these wheels, guys. This is the main wheel, and then the brakes are already pretty much installed. And then here is the nose wheel. So I'm gonna go ahead and just assemble the landing gears together, and then test fit it into the Voyager, and then show you guys how that setup looks like when I'm done. Alright, so I pretty much have the landing gears test fitted into the left wing. Give you guys a closer look. Look at the size of this landing gear. It's pretty bulky. Very rigid design. What I do need to do to the landing gear right now, it doesn't fit properly because the struts need to be adjusted in angle, so it needs to basically trail back just slightly. And then also it doesn't sit flush at the moment because there's the fiberglass wheel well is actually getting in the way of the motor from being able to sit flush. So what I'm gonna have to do is cut the fiberglass here basically to the shape of the motor of the retracts so that I could mount it properly so that it sits flush with the landing gear former. And then the second thing I'm going to need to do is adjust the angle of the strut, because right now it is straight, so it needs to trail back just a little bit. So we're going to have to do a little bit more adjustment, and then a little bit of modification to the wheel well, and then we'll be able to drop our landing gear in place. And then I'll finalize the wiring of the retracts, the flaps, and the ailerons on this left wing. Alright, so here is the wheel well cut out for the left wing on the Voyager. So I just basically got my Dremel and basically carved out the shape of the Electron retracts, and now that I have that cut out, it sits flush. Earlier I talked about the adjustment on the trailing link on the Electron strut. So to accomplish that, there's a grub screw in here that you basically rotate, and there's a ball link right at the tip of that, and that ball link basically pushes the fork forward so that it actually gives you that angle that you need. So basically this is how it's going to look. Now I haven't done the final adjustments yet, but this is kind of just a mock-up of how it's going to look once it's done. So it still needs a little bit of minor adjustment. I need to actually have the trailing link angled back just a little bit, and then finalize this, and then we can continue on with the wiring and then the harness that's going to be used on this wing. Okay, so now I got the retracts installed. So basically have a M5 bolt with a blind nut underneath that, and then did a little bit of adjustment on the trailing link. I may change it a little bit. It looks like it might be trailing back a little too much, but I'll make the final adjustment once I have both of the wings completed. Alright, so quick update for you guys. So this is the right wing, and this is the aileron that we are looking at right now. So what I did notice with this is that with the up deflection, no issues, plenty of travel, but notice how on the down aileron deflection, it's actually very limited. And I think what I suspect is happening is that there's a lot of excess fiberglass here along the leading edge of the aileron side under the wing. And I think what's happening, and I've shined a flashlight through it, is that this is actually hitting the wood former that's inside of the aileron on the wing. So what it's doing is it's preventing the aileron to tuck in a little bit more. So I'm actually losing quite a bit of deflection with this setup right now. So what I did was I drew a line, and this is about 5 millimeters, and then another one at 3 millimeters. And then what I'm going to do is take my Dremel cutting tool and use the disc cutter, and I'm just going to cut that line, the first line there, check to see if I get a little bit more movement, and then worst case scenario, I'm going to go all the way back here, which is like 5 millimeters, basically all the way down, and then see if this aileron will tuck in even more. Because right now I did a little bit of sanding already, but it's still binding up against the wood former inside of the wing, and it's, you know, limiting my deflection of the aileron. So I'm gonna go with 3 millimeters for now, and then go from there, give you guys an update. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is install the wing harness that's gonna go onto the Voyager. So what I'm gonna do is use one of these amp connectors. This is a 10-pin connector that's gonna house the ailerons, the flaps, the retracts, and the brakes. So it'll just be one single connection. What I really like about this amp connector is that it's got a locking harness that simply just clicks into place. When you're done, you just pinch the two sides, and then the harness comes out. So this portion is going to be mounted from the inside, so it'll be flush. I don't want to drill any more holes to the fuselage, so I'm just going to use the existing holes that was done by the factory. So basically this harness is going to be installed somewhere right here in this position, and then the other end is going to go into the wing. So I'm going to go ahead and mark up where all the former is going to mount to, and then drill the holes, and then install this amp connector onto the Voyager. Okay, so we have the left wing of the Voyager on the table. Wanted to show you guys the connector that I made. So basically made my own harness, and on the end of the harness is a 10-pin amp connector, and then the other end has all of our leads for the servos, flaps, brakes. And then so essentially there was a hole that was drilled out down here. I just basically made it a little wider. I'm going to feed the wire through the leading edge, and then there's a cutout somewhere around here on the former that I'm going to feed the wires through. So it's going to feed all of the leads somewhere around there to the servos, and then the retracts and the brakes. So I'm going to go ahead and fish these wires through the formers, and then show you guys how it looks in the end.